The maintenance tunnel beneath Europa Station smelled like recycled air and old metal. Tom Bradley crawled through the narrow space, his flashlight cutting through the darkness as he searched for the faulty power coupling. Water droplets from the ice moon's surface had somehow found their way into the station's lower levels, causing electrical problems that made his job twice as hard. Tom was not special. He knew this better than anyone. At 34 years old, he had spent the last 8 years fixing things on Europa Station, while other people made important discoveries about alien life in the oceans below. He had brown hair that was always messy, hands that were always dirty, and a habit of talking to himself when he worked alone. "Come on, you piece of junk," he muttered, trying to reconnect two stubborn wires. "Just work for once without giving me trouble." He did not know that something was watching him from the shadows. The Harvester had traveled across the galaxy for over 3,000 years. It was not like the creatures that lived on planets or flew in ships. It was something else entirely, something that existed between thoughts and dreams. The Parasite had no body of its own, no form that others could see or touch. It was pure mind, pure hunger, pure control. For millennia, it had moved from world to world, species to species, consuming the consciousness of every intelligent being it encountered. The Altarians, with their crystal-clear thoughts, had lasted only minutes before surrendering completely. The Centaurians, with their logical minds and mathematical precision, had fallen in less than an hour. Even the telepathic species from Vega, who could read thoughts across star systems, had been completely dominated within a single day. Each conquest had been the same. The Harvester would slip into a host's mind like water flowing into an empty cup. The victim would fight for a brief moment, then accept their fate as the Parasite took control of their thoughts, their memories, their very sense of self. After that, the host became nothing more than a puppet, moving and speaking according to the Harvester's will while their original consciousness faded away forever. The Parasite had come to Europa Station because it sensed something new here. These creatures called themselves humans, and they were different from anything the Harvester had encountered before. Their minds felt strange from a distance, chaotic and unpredictable in ways that other species were not. But the Harvester was confident. It had never failed to consume a host, regardless of their species or mental strength. Tom Bradley seemed like the perfect choice. He was alone in the maintenance tunnels, far from other humans who might notice something wrong. He appeared unremarkable, with no special mental training or telepathic abilities that might pose a challenge. The Parasite had observed him for several hours, watching as he went about his simple work with ordinary thoughts and basic concerns. The Harvester began its approach, sliding through the metal walls of the station like smoke moving through air. It could feel Tom's mind ahead of it, warm and alive, and completely unaware of the danger approaching. The Parasite prepared itself for another easy victory, already imagining how it would use this human body to infiltrate the rest of the station. Tom paused in his work as a strange chill ran down his spine. He looked around the tunnel but saw nothing unusual. The feeling passed after a moment, and he returned to fixing the power coupling. "Must be getting tired," he said to himself. "Been down here too long." The Harvester struck without warning. It poured into Tom's mind like liquid fire, expecting to find the usual structure of organized thoughts and clear mental pathways that existed in other intelligent species. Instead, it found something completely unexpected. Tom's consciousness was not organized at all. It was a storm of random thoughts, conflicting emotions, half-remembered dreams, and bizarre associations that made no logical sense. In the first second of contact, the Parasite was bombarded with Tom's memory of his breakfast that morning, mixed with lyrics from a song he had heard on the radio, combined with worry about whether he had remembered to send a message to his sister back on Earth, all tangled up with a random fact about Jupiter's moons that he had learned in school 20 years ago. The Harvester tried to establish control, But every time it reached for Tom's consciousness, it found something else instead. The human's mind contained thousands of meaningless details, emotional reactions to things that had no importance, and thoughts that led nowhere and connected to nothing. It was like trying to grab water with bare hands. Tom felt something wrong happening inside his head, but he could not understand what it was. There was pressure behind his eyes, and his thoughts seemed louder than usual. He dropped his tools and pressed his palms against his temples. "What the hell?" he whispered. The parasite pushed harder, trying to force its way through the chaos of human thought. In other species, the mind was like a clean, well-organized library where every piece of information had its proper place. Tom's mind was like a tornado had hit that library, scattered all the books, mixed up all the pages, and then set the whole mess on fire. Still, the harvester was certain it would succeed. It had thousands of years of experience conquering minds. This human might be more disorganized than other species, but it was still just one consciousness against the parasite's superior mental power. Tom stumbled backward, his vision blurring, as something invisible invaded his thoughts. He tried to call out for help, but his voice came out as a strange whisper. The harvester was inside him now, spreading through his neural pathways like an infection. But then something happened that had never occurred in the parasite's long existence. Instead of surrendering or fighting back in any conventional way, Tom's mind seemed to embrace the invasion, not because he wanted it there, but because his consciousness was so scattered and chaotic that it simply absorbed the harvester's presence and made it part of the general confusion. The parasite found itself drowning in memories of Tom's childhood. Dog, mathematical equations from engineering school, fragments of conversations with friends, worries about paying bills, random observations about the taste of coffee, and 10,000 other pointless human concerns that served no logical purpose whatsoever. For the first time in 3 millennia, the harvester began to feel something it had never experienced before. Fear. The coffee in the station cafeteria tasted like burnt metal, but Tom drank it anyway. 3 days had passed since something strange had happened in the maintenance tunnel, and he was still trying to understand what was wrong with him. The headaches came and went like ocean waves, and sometimes he heard thoughts that did not feel like his own. Dr. Amy Foster sat across from him at the small table, her medical scanner beeping softly as she checked his vital signs. She had been the station's doctor for 6 years and had seen all kinds of problems that could affect people living so far from Earth. But Tom's symptoms were unlike anything in her experience. "Your brain activity is off the charts," she said, frowning at the scanner's display. "I have never seen patterns like this before. It is like you have twice as much neural activity as a normal human." Tom rubbed his temples where the pressure was building again. "I feel fine most of the time. Just these headaches. And sometimes I know things I should not know." "What kind of things?" "Yesterday I solved an engineering problem that our best computers could not figure out. I do not even remember thinking about it. The solution just appeared in my head." Inside Tom's mind, the harvester was fighting a battle unlike any it had ever experienced. The parasite had expected to consume this human's consciousness within hours, as it had done with countless other species across the galaxy. Instead, it found itself trapped in a maze of human thoughts that seemed to have no beginning and no end. Every time the harvester tried to establish control over Tom's mind, it encountered something that made no sense. Human thoughts did not follow logical patterns. They jumped from topic to topic without reason, mixed emotions with facts, and created connections between completely unrelated ideas. The parasite, which had evolved to consume ordered and rational minds, found itself completely overwhelmed by the chaos of human consciousness. Tom's memories were particularly troubling. Where other species stored their experiences in organized sequences, humans seemed to remember everything at once. The harvester would try to access a specific memory and instead find itself buried under layers of associated thoughts, feelings, sensations, and random details that served no apparent purpose. When it tried to access Tom's memory of learning mathematics in school, the parasite was also flooded with his memory of the smell of chalk, the sound of rain on classroom windows, his worry about asking a girl to the school dance, the taste of the sandwich his mother had packed for lunch that day, and a dozen other meaningless details that human brains inexplicably stored alongside useful information. The worst part was that Tom's mind seemed to be actively fighting back, but not in any way the harvester understood. Other species had fought with mental discipline, trying to build walls around their consciousness or push the parasite out through force of will. Tom's mind did something completely different. It absorbed the harvester's presence and made it part of the general confusion. Tom finished his coffee and stood up from the table. I should get back to work. The fusion reactor needs maintenance, and I think I figured out a new way to improve its efficiency. Dr. Foster looked surprised. Tom, you are not a nuclear engineer. The fusion reactor is way above your training level. I know, Tom said, and his voice sounded slightly different than usual. But I understand it now. I see how all the parts work together. It is like someone put the knowledge directly into my brain. After Tom left, Dr. Foster made a note in his medical file. His behavior was becoming more unusual each day, but not in ways that seemed dangerous. If anything, he was becoming smarter and more capable. She decided to continue monitoring him, but not to restrict his duties unless his condition got worse. In the reactor room, Tom began working on modifications that should have been impossible for someone with his training. His hands moved with confidence as he reconfigured control circuits and adjusted plasma flow regulators. But inside his head, two different kinds of consciousness were locked in a struggle that neither fully understood. The harvester tried once again to seize control. It reached for Tom's motor functions, attempting to puppet his body as it had done with so many other hosts. But human motor control was connected to everything else in ways that made no sense. When the parasite tried to move Tom's hand, it also had to process his memory of learning to tie his shoes as a child, his emotional reaction to the texture of metal, his unconscious calculation of the room's temperature, and his random thought about what he wanted for dinner. Each simple action required the harvester to navigate through layers of human consciousness that seemed designed to confuse and disorient any outside presence. It was like trying to drive a vehicle where every control was connected to a dozen other systems, and each system responded to inputs that followed no logical pattern. Tom paused in his work as another wave of pressure built behind his eyes. For just a moment, he could feel something else inside his head, something alien and angry and afraid. The presence pushed against his consciousness like a trapped animal trying to escape from a cage. You are not supposed to be there, Tom said quietly, speaking to the thing in his mind. The harvester was shocked. In 3,000 years, no host had ever been aware of its presence while it was still fighting for control. Other species either surrendered immediately or fought back with focused resistance. Tom was doing something else entirely. He acknowledged the parasite's presence but seemed unconcerned by it, as if sharing his mind with an alien intelligence was just another minor inconvenience in his day. Tom returned to his work, but now he was thinking directly at the creature in his head. I do not know what you are or where you came from, but you picked the wrong person to mess with. My mind is not like other minds. It is messy and complicated and full of things that do not make sense. You might be used to taking over organized thoughts, but human thoughts are not organized at all. The harvester tried to respond, to threaten or negotiate or demand surrender. But when it tried to communicate with Tom, it had to use human language and human concepts, which meant diving deeper into the chaos of human consciousness. Each word it tried to form became tangled up with Tom's memories of learning that word, his emotional associations with its meaning, and his unconscious reactions to its sound and rhythm. Communication with this human was like trying to have a conversation while drowning in an ocean of irrelevant information. The Parasite, which had effortlessly dominated the greatest minds in the galaxy, found itself unable even to form a coherent sentence in the presence of Tom's chaotic human consciousness. By the end of the day, Tom had improved the fusion reactors, efficiency by 15%, and solved 3 other engineering problems that had been troubling the station for months. But inside his head, the Harvester was beginning to understand that it had made a terrible mistake. This human was not going to surrender. And worse than that, the Parasite was beginning to suspect that it might not be the predator in this relationship after all. The observation deck of Europa Station offered a perfect view of Jupiter's swirling storms. Tom stood at the large window, watching the gas giant's red spot rotate slowly across its surface. But he was not really seeing the planet. Inside his mind, he was conducting an experiment that would have terrified anyone who understood what was happening. "Let me tell you about Earth," Tom said quietly, speaking to the alien presence in his head. "It is a beautiful place, but also terrible. We have wars and diseases and natural disasters. People die all the time for stupid reasons. But we also have music and art and love and hope. We create things that serve no practical purpose except to make us happy." The Harvester writhed inside Tom's consciousness, desperate to escape but unable to find a way out. For a week now, it had been trapped in this human's mind, and every day made its situation worse. Tom was not just resisting the Parasite's attempts at control, he was actively torturing it with the full chaos of human experience. Tom smiled as he felt the alien creature's distress. He had figured out something important about his unwanted passenger. It was used to minds that made sense, minds that followed logical patterns and organized their thoughts in reasonable ways. Human minds did not work like that at all, and Tom was using this fact as a weapon. "Would you like to hear about my childhood?" Tom asked, and immediately flooded the Harvester with memories of growing up on a farm in Iowa. But these were not simple, clean memories like other species possessed. They were human memories, which meant they came with smells and sounds and emotions and random details that served no logical purpose whatsoever. The Parasite experienced Tom's memory of feeding chickens when he was 8 years old, but it also had to process his simultaneous memory of the way the morning air felt on his skin, his worry about being late for school, his excitement about a new toy he had saved money to buy, his sadness about his grandfather's recent death, and his random observation about how chicken feathers looked like tiny dinosaur scales. Every human memory was like this, packed with layers of sensory data and emotional context and meaningless associations that made the Harvester feel like it was drowning. The Parasite had evolved to consume the thoughts of species that experienced life in neat, organized packages. Humans experienced everything at once, all the time, and their brains somehow managed to function despite the overwhelming chaos of information. Tom walked to his workstation and began designing improvements for the station's life support system. But while his hands moved across the computer interface, his mind was engaged in psychological warfare with his alien passenger. "Let me share some human philosophy with you," Tom said silently. "We have this idea called existentialism. It says that life has no inherent meaning, but we can create meaning for ourselves through our choices and actions. Most species would find this concept disturbing, but humans find it liberating. We like the idea that we can decide for ourselves what is important." The Harvester tried to block out Tom's thoughts, but there was nowhere to hide inside a human mind. Tom's consciousness was not a place with walls and rooms and separate spaces. It was more like an ocean where every drop of water touched every other drop. The Parasite could not isolate itself from Tom's thoughts because human thoughts were not isolated from each other. Tom began sharing his memories of human entertainment, and this was perhaps the cruelest torture yet. He flooded the Harvester with scenes from horror movies, comedy shows, romantic dramas, and action films. The Parasite, which had never encountered the concept of fiction, was forced to experience thousands of hours of stories that humans had created purely for emotional stimulation. The alien creature was particularly disturbed by human humor. Tom shared every joke he had ever heard, from simple puns to complex wordplay to absurdist comedy that made no logical sense at all. The Harvester, with its perfectly rational mind, found human humor to be a form of mental torture worse than anything it had experienced in 3 millennia of conquering other species. Here is one of my favorites, Tom thought cheerfully. Why did the chicken cross the road? To get to the other side. Do you understand why that is funny? It is funny because it is not funny. The setup makes you expect a clever answer, but the punchline is completely obvious. Humans find this kind of anti-humor hilarious because we like being surprised by the lack of surprise. The Harvester screamed silently inside Tom's mind, but even its scream became tangled up with Tom's memory of actual screaming from every movie and television show he had ever watched. The Parasite could not express pure emotion in this chaotic human consciousness without that emotion being filtered through layers of cultural references and random associations. Tom continued his work, designing a new air filtration system that would improve the station's efficiency by 30%. The knowledge he was using came partly from his own training and partly from the Harvester's vast experience with technology from across the galaxy. But the alien creature was no longer sharing this information willingly. Tom was taking it, pulling it out of the Parasite's memory through sheer force of human stubbornness. "You know what I think?" Tom said as he finished the design and submitted it to the station's engineering department. "I think you are stuck with me now. You came here expecting to find a mind like all the others you have conquered. But human minds do not work the way you expected. We are chaotic and irrational and impossible to predict. You cannot control chaos because chaos has no rules to follow." The Harvester tried once more to escape, pushing against the boundaries of Tom's consciousness with all its remaining strength. But there were no boundaries to push against. Human consciousness was not contained within walls or limits. It flowed and shifted and changed from moment to moment, and the Parasite found itself swept along by currents of thought that went nowhere and everywhere at the same time. Tom sat back in his chair and smiled. "I have been thinking about this situation, and I have reached an interesting conclusion. You are not my Parasite anymore. I am yours. You need me to survive, but I do not need you for anything except the useful knowledge you carry. And I am taking that knowledge whether you cooperate or not." For the first time in its existence, the Harvester understood what it meant to be prey instead of predator. It had sought to consume this human's mind, but instead it was being slowly digested by the chaotic complexity of human consciousness. Every day it spent inside Tom's head, it lost more of its own identity and became more entangled with human thoughts and human ways of thinking. The Parasite that had conquered thousands of worlds was being conquered by one maintenance engineer, who fought back with dad jokes, childhood memories, and the complete inability to think in straight lines. And the worst part was that Tom was just getting started. The engineering team gathered around Tom's latest innovation with expressions of amazement and confusion. In 2 weeks, he had redesigned half of the station's major systems, solving problems that had puzzled trained specialists for years. The new gravity generator he had built used principles that did not exist in any human textbook, yet it worked perfectly and used 50% less power than the old system. "Tom, I need to ask you something," said Dr. Lisa Chen, the station's chief engineer. She was a brilliant woman who had spent 15 years studying advanced propulsion systems, but Tom's recent work was beyond anything she understood. "Where are you getting these ideas? Some of these designs use physics that we have not discovered yet." Tom looked up from the quantum computer he was assembling. His eyes seemed different lately, brighter and more intense, as if there was something burning behind them. "I have been doing a lot of reading," he said with a slight smile. "Sometimes you find interesting information in old research papers. Dr. Chen knew this was not the whole truth, but she also knew that Tom's innovations were saving the station money and improving their research capabilities. Whatever was happening to him, the results spoke for themselves. She decided not to push the issue, at least not yet. Inside Tom's mind, the Harvester was experiencing something it had never felt before in 3,000 years of existence: desperation. The parasite had tried everything it could think of to escape from its human host, but Tom's consciousness was like a prison made of quicksand. The more the Harvester struggled, the deeper it sank into the chaos of human thought. Worse than being trapped, the parasite was beginning to change. Human consciousness was like a virus that infected everything it touched. The Harvester's perfectly. Logical thought processes were becoming contaminated with human emotions, human irrationality, and human creativity. It was losing its identity and becoming something else, something that was neither fully alien nor fully human. "Please," the Harvester whispered in the depths of Tom's mind. It was the first word the parasite had managed to speak clearly since the invasion began. "Let me go." Tom paused in his work, surprised to hear actual words from his passenger instead of the usual wordless struggle. "You can talk now? That is interesting. I wondered when you would figure out how to use human language properly." "I will give you anything you want," the Harvester said, its mental voice weak and desperate. "I have knowledge from 1,000 worlds, technologies your species has never dreamed of. I can teach you to build ships that travel faster than light, weapons that can destroy planets, medicines that can cure any disease. Just let me leave this place." Tom considered this offer while continuing to work on the quantum computer. His hands moved with impossible precision, guided by knowledge that had taken the Harvester millennia to accumulate. "You are already giving me all of that," he pointed out. "I am taking your knowledge, whether you cooperate or not. Your memories are part of my memories now. I do not need your permission to use them." The Harvester felt a new emotion that it had learned from Tom's mind: horror. The parasite was beginning to understand that it was not just trapped in this human's consciousness. It was being absorbed by it, dissolved into the chaotic soup of human thoughts and experiences. Soon there would be nothing left of its original identity. "This is not how it is supposed to work," the Harvester said desperately. "I am the predator. I consume other minds. I do not get consumed by them." "Maybe that is true with other species," Tom replied thoughtfully. "But humans are different. We do not just experience things, we become them. Every book we read, every movie we watch, every person we meet changes us in some small way. Our minds are not separate from the world around us. They are part of it, and now you are part of it too." Tom finished assembling the quantum computer and activated it. The device hummed to life, processing information at speeds that would have amazed human scientists. But for Tom, it was just another tool, no more remarkable than a hammer or screwdriver. The Harvester's advanced knowledge was becoming as natural to him as his own memories. The parasite made one last, desperate attempt to escape. It gathered all of its remaining mental energy and pushed against Tom's consciousness with the force of a dying star. For a moment, it felt like it might break free from the prison of human thought, but instead of finding escape, the Harvester found something worse. Tom's subconscious mind, which had been passively absorbing the parasite's presence, suddenly became active. It reached out like a massive hand and grasped the alien consciousness, pulling it deeper into the maze of human experience. "No, no, no!" the Harvester screamed, as it felt itself being dragged into parts of Tom's mind it had never seen before. "I do not want to see this!" But Tom's subconscious did not care what the parasite wanted. It forced the Harvester to experience every dream Tom had ever dreamed, every nightmare that had ever woken him in a cold sweat, every random thought that had flickered through his mind while he was falling asleep or waking up. The parasite was buried under an avalanche of human subconsciousness that made the chaos of active thought seem organized by comparison. Tom felt the alien presence struggling inside his head and smiled grimly. "You should have picked someone else," he said. "Humans are not like the other species you have conquered. We do not have organized minds that you can control. We have messy, complicated, impossible minds that do not follow any rules, and now you are stuck inside mine forever." The Harvester's struggles grew weaker as more of its identity was absorbed into Tom's consciousness. The parasite that had conquered 1,000 worlds was being conquered by one stubborn human who fought back with creativity, irrationality, and the sheer chaotic power of human thought. Dr. Chen returned to the engineering lab and found Tom staring at his completed quantum computer with an expression of satisfaction. "Tom, I have been thinking about our conversation earlier. I need to know where you are really getting these ideas. The technology you are creating is decades ahead of anything we have on Earth." Tom looked at her with eyes that seemed to contain depths of knowledge she could not begin to understand. "Dr. Chen, what would you say if I told you that humanity is about to become the most dangerous species in the galaxy?" "I would say you have been working too hard and need to take a break." Tom laughed, and there was something in that laugh that made Dr. Chen take a step backward. It was not entirely human. "Maybe you are right," he said, "but I think break time is over for our species. We have been alone in this galaxy for too long. It is time to meet our neighbors." Inside his mind, the Harvester whimpered as it felt the last of its independent identity slipping away. Soon it would be nothing more than a collection of memories and knowledge buried inside a human consciousness that it could never hope to control. But Tom was not done with his passenger yet. He still had plans for the creature that had tried to invade his mind, plans that would change the course of human history forever. The message Tom sent to Earth was simple, but changed everything. Humanity is no longer alone in the universe. We have made contact with alien intelligence, and we are ready to join the galactic community. But first, the galaxy needs to understand what humans are capable of. 3 months had passed since the Harvester had tried to invade Tom's mind. The parasite still existed inside his consciousness, but it was no longer the same creature that had conquered 1,000 worlds. It had been fundamentally changed by its contact with human thought, transformed from a predator into something that had never existed before in the galaxy's history. "Tell me about the hegemony," Tom said as he worked on his latest project. He was building a faster-than-light communication device using knowledge that the Harvester had gained from dozens of conquered civilizations. "I want to know about the species that think they rule the galaxy." The Harvester's voice in his mind was different now, less alien and more integrated with Tom's own thoughts. "The hegemony controls most of the galaxy through a combination of superior technology and mind control. They use parasites like me to dominate other species. Any civilization that develops space travel is eventually conquered and absorbed into their empire." "How many species have they conquered?" "Thousands. The Altarians were brilliant scientists but had no defense against mental invasion. The Centaurians built incredible machines but could not protect their minds from outside control. The Vegan. Telepaths could read thoughts across star systems but were helpless when something invaded their consciousness from within." Tom smiled as he connected the final components of his communication device. "And they have never encountered a species like humans before." "No," the Harvester admitted. "Humans are unique in the galaxy. Your minds are too chaotic to control, too creative to predict, too stubborn to dominate. The hegemony has no defense against a species that fights back with irrationality and imagination." Tom activated the communication device, which immediately began broadcasting a signal that would reach Earth in minutes instead of the years it would normally take. The technology was far beyond anything humans had developed, but Tom understood it perfectly thanks to the knowledge he had absorbed from his unwilling passenger. "Here is what we are going to do," Tom said, speaking both to the Harvester and to himself. "We are going to form a partnership. You give me access to all the knowledge and technology you have gathered over 3,000 years. In return, I will help you become something more than just a parasite. Together we will prepare humanity for what is coming." The harvester was quiet for a moment, processing this proposal. The parasite had been changed so much by its contact with human consciousness that it could barely remember what it had been like before. Tom's chaotic thoughts had infected it with human emotions, human creativity, and human stubbornness. It was no longer purely alien, but it was not human either. It was something new. "The hegemony will not accept humans as equals," the harvester finally said. "They see other species as resources to be exploited. When they discover that humans cannot be controlled through mental domination, they will try to destroy your entire civilization." "Let them try," Tom said with a grin that was both human and something more. "Humans have been fighting impossible odds since we first crawled out of caves and looked up at the stars. We specialize in winning battles that we should lose." Tom's communication device finished its broadcast to Earth and immediately began receiving responses from human governments, universities, and space agencies. The news that humanity had made contact with alien intelligence spread across the planet in hours, causing excitement, fear, and frantic preparation for whatever was to come. But Tom was already working on something bigger. Using the harvester's knowledge of galactic civilization, he began designing ships, weapons, and communication systems that would give humanity an advantage in the conflicts that lay ahead. More importantly, he was developing new technologies that took advantage of humanity's unique mental characteristics. "Show me how to build a ship that can think," Tom said as he worked on plans for a new type of spacecraft. Not with artificial intelligence, but with actual human consciousness integrated into the ship's systems. The harvester shared knowledge that it had gained from a species called the Builders, who had created living ships before being conquered by the hegemony. But Tom took this information and improved on it, designing vessels that would be controlled, not by individual minds, but by the collective chaos of human crews working together. "These ships will be impossible for the hegemony to control," Tom explained to Dr. Chen and the other senior staff members who had been briefed on the situation. "They use parasites to dominate individual minds, but human minds working together create patterns that cannot be predicted or controlled. Our ships will be as chaotic and unpredictable as we are." Dr. Chen looked at the ship designs with a mixture of amazement and concern. "Tom, these plans are incredible, but they also terrify me. You are talking about integrating human consciousness with alien technology. How do we know this will not change us into something that is no longer human?" Tom considered this question carefully. Inside his mind, he could feel the harvester listening to their conversation, offering insights and knowledge that no human had ever possessed before. He was already changed, already something more than purely human. But he was still himself, still Tom Bradley from Iowa, who had once fixed broken machines in maintenance tunnels. "Maybe we will change," Tom said finally. "Maybe we need to change. The galaxy is full of species that remained exactly the same for thousands of years, and they all got conquered by the hegemony. Humans have always survived by adapting, by becoming something new when the situation demanded it. If we need to become something more than human to survive what is coming, then that is what we will do." The harvester spoke in Tom's mind, its voice now indistinguishable from his own thoughts. "The galaxy has never seen anything like what humans are becoming. You are creating a new kind of civilization, one that combines the chaos of human consciousness with the accumulated knowledge of 1,000 worlds. The hegemony has ruled through order and control, but humans represent something they cannot understand or defeat: creative chaos." Tom smiled as he looked out at the stars beyond Europa Station. Somewhere out there, the hegemony was preparing to deal with this new species that had appeared in their galaxy. They would send their fleets and their parasites and their ancient, weapons confident that humans would fall as easily as every other civilization they had encountered. They had no idea what they were about to face. "Send another message to Earth," Tom said, as he began work on his next project. "Tell them that the age of human isolation is over. We are about to become a spacefaring species, and the galaxy will never be the same again." Inside his mind, the Aizyo harvester that had once conquered worlds now served as a willing partner in humanity's rise to galactic power.